Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Recruit Military Live, a continuing series of live broadcasts covering all things military transition, veteran employment, mil-spouse employment, and much, much more. My name is Lucas Connolly, retired U.S. Army officer and former TAP program manager, here to share with you the ins and outs of navigating the turbulent waters of civilian employment. If you're in search of meaningful employment, well, you're in the right place. Visit rmvets.com/live to learn more. All right, folks, so let's roll into today's topic, which is career fairs. Have you recently attended a career fair and got lackluster success? Are you about to attend a career fair and you'd like to know how to make the most of it? Well, today's topic is career fair success, making the most of every handshake. So check your equipment, tighten your chin strap, and get ready for a full throttle, high performance look at how you can get the most out of your next career fair experience. Our guest today is standing in the door and waiting for green. He's a former member of America's Honor Guard, the 82nd Airborne Division, with service in both Iraq and Afghanistan. He's spent now 12 years, just celebrated his 12th anniversary with Recruit Military, America's largest military-centric recruiting company. During those 12 years, he's been helping military talent find meaningful employment with companies who value that military talent. So keep your feet and knees together, check canopy and gain canopy control, and welcome to the show today, Mr. Chris Newsome.
Airborne, Lucas. Thank you for the intro.
And we're glad to have you, Chris. All right, folks out there in internet land, now that you know who we are, we'd like to hear who you are. Hit us up in that chat window. Let us know where you're watching from, who you're with, who you're served with, what your status is. Are you active duty in transition, National Guard reserves, or something else we haven't thought of? I'd like to hear from you. We'd like to hear from you. If you got any questions, comments, issues, concerns, or just some gripes, feel free to jump in there, and time allowing, we'll address whatever it is you'd like to talk about. So, Chris, no doubt, folks, unless they've been living under a rock at the bottom of the ocean somewhere, they've heard about Recruit Military and about the great career fairs that we offer, but most don't get a good coach on how to get in there and create the best experience and get the most results out of their attendance.
Yeah. It's a tool to be wielded. It's having it is one thing, having it and knowing how to effectively apply it to a problem is a completely different scenario. So yeah, there can be blind spots, there can be misconceptions. Career fairs are a really great opportunity for you to press the flesh, be in person, make a great first impression on an organization that could potentially be your next employer. So we do this a lot. As you know, at this point, Lucas, and for those in the audience that are aware, even those that aren't aware, career fairs are a big part of what we do. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it numbers around 16 or 1700 that we have held in the history of Recruit Military. And we started running events. This is back to, I think, 2006, maybe 2008, somewhere around that time frame. We started running events, and at this point, our tempo is about 100 every year. Wow. Around 100 in-person and virtual events. So career fairs are a big part of what we do here.
Okay, now let's just assume that I'm a transitioning service member, or I'm a veteran, I'm a mil-spouse. I've heard great things about the Recruit Military career fairs, and I've decided I'd like to attend. What are some of the steps I should take right out of the gate to start getting ready?
First things first, conventional wisdom would tell you, register for the event. And there's a lot of benefit to doing that ahead of time. I'll try to keep this as succinct as possible. We'll always be able to accommodate you same day, meaning if you just learn about the event or you don't get around to it and you just show up to the event the day that it's running, that's fine. We will accommodate you. We'll make sure you get in there. We'll get you as best prepared as we can with the limited fews that we have. But ideally, you want to register ahead of time. That's the first step, because what you do is essentially announce that you're committed to attending the event. The organizations that are going to attend get a rundown of the list of individuals that are going to be attending. They will have access to your professional profile, to your resume. For you as a job seeker, it gives you an opportunity to get prepared. Ideally, being able to register with, at least a week in front of you will put you in a communication tempo where we'll share with you general best practices. Here's how you're going to be successful. Here's how you piece together a 30-second elevator pitch. Here's how you dress to impress. And we'll even give you a list of the organizations that are attending, as well as some of the opportunities that they're going to be trying to extend your way so that you can do your due diligence, do your homework on the front end, learn about the organization, learn about the opportunities, and even apply ahead of time. Applying to events prior to attending is a strategic play because you're going to have an elevated conversation if you've done that. So, but it all boils down to registering on the front end. That would be the first thing that I tell everybody to do.
Now, I heard you say dress to excess, dress to excess, dress for success. You mean to tell me that my cutoff BDU shorts and my Ninja Turtles t-shirt just isn't going to send the right impression when I walk in?
Probably not, and I don't want to confuse anybody into thinking that you have to wear, a tux or a three-piece suit for a job fair, or a hiring event. You're wanting to dress primarily for the role that you're going to be going for. In some cases, that is suit and tie. If we're hosting an event and it's on an active installation or near an installation, you're in your duty uniform, perfectly acceptable. Certainly encourage you to attend in that attire, but generally speaking, business casual. You cannot go wrong with business casual. A nice pair of slacks, a button-up shirt, blouse, decent shoes, and you're going to be just fine. So somewhere between hyper formal and hyper informal, that middle ground tends to be business casual.
Okay. Now you said that there's a stream of communication starting once you've registered. Is there information that is going to be shared with me? Am I going to get some things that are going to help me create a plan? I mean, should I go in and just round robin, or should I prioritize? So somebody said that, plan to succeed or plan to fail. Fail to plan is plan to fail. I mean, what kind of things should I be planning on ahead of time?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Lucas. I don't want to say there's one master way to navigate a hiring event. There's a lot of different strategies, but to keep it high level, understanding the organizations that you're going to be meeting with is a very just wise initial step to take. You don't want to walk into an event blind, deaf, and dumb. You don't want to go in there not being aware of who the organizations are or what they do. I'll tell you right now, a little insider tip: never go to a recruiter and say, "What do you do? What does your company do? What are you hiring for?" It's like kryptonite. You might as well just move on to the next organization or the next booth and try again. These organizations want to know that you're coming in at least somewhat prepared. And heads up, the instance that I mentioned on the front end, if you only have the ability to walk in same day, that's okay. We all carry around our, little supercomputer smartphones nowadays. You can fire up Google and do a real quick rundown. It takes seconds to look at an organization, look at their mission statement, look at their jobs page, get a real high level understanding of who they are, their industry, and what categories of work they're looking for, so that again you're having just a little bit more of a elevated conversation when you meet them. But to tie that into the communication tempo that we're going to be sending out, like, yes, we are going to be introducing you to some of those initial best practices, and it's a handful of bullets. It's a handful of steps that you should take to be successful. But again, it's truly not a one size fits all, but being prepared for any scenario is the best path towards success. So registering on the front end, getting that communication tempo so that we can give you all of those best practices, introduce you to the brands that are going to be there, encourage you to do a little bit of that legwork on the front end, create that profile, look at those organizations and their jobs, and be prepared to, give your 30-second elevator pitch. These are the sort of tactical elements that are going to be included in kind of the robust series of communications that we'll send on the front end to get you prepared.
Great. Now, I've heard about the importance of preparing, knowing who's going to be there, dressing professionally, making a solid first impression, sticking that hand out, getting a good handshake, good firm handshake, eye contact, shoulders back, chin up, and delivering that elevator pitch. What happens next?
Yeah. What happens next is unique to the individual and to that organization. It's not going to be the same each time. Rewinding ever so slightly, I want to just touch on that 30-second elevator pitch, because it really does tie all of that preparation together that we spoke of on the front end. The concept is you're in an elevator to get from one floor to the next, roughly 30 seconds. You're meeting, there's a stranger in there. You have 30 seconds to convey who you are and to introduce yourself, essentially. That's what you're doing at a career fair for an organization that you're meeting for the first time. You want to take roughly 30 seconds, left or right, a little bit. Nobody's going to pull out a timer on you, but roughly 30 seconds to convey who you are, what you've done, what your experience is, what you want to do moving forward. And that's kind of your lead in to that conversation. And that will really dictate the ebb and flow of what happens next. In a lot of cases, these can feel like a speed dating session.
Okay.
Here's who I am. The recruiter on the other side of the table for that organization is going to do the same thing. And depending on how much synergy there is between those two pitches, that's going to kind of dictate the level of conversation that you have next. In many cases, you're going to be introduced to their applicant tracking system. They're going to encourage you to formally submit your application online. And I just want to flag this for everybody. If you've ever been to a career fair, or if you go, to make sure you're managing your expectations, online applications are a necessary step. It is a staple within this process. That's never an organization dismissing you or trying to shoo you away and just say, go check out the job listings on the site. That's literally the next step that you have to do in order to be elevated for the next conversation. Know what a recruiter is and know what a recruiter is not. That recruiter's primary intent is to fill a pipeline for the organization for potential talent. They're not necessarily the ones that are going to be hiring you.
Right.
So keep in mind, some organizations will actually bring hiring managers into the fold, and on the spot hiring does happen. Keep in mind there's a life cycle relative to recruiting. You've got to do background checks. You've got to come in for interviews, second, third interviews, depending on the organization. So it's not a one size fits all. So it's almost impossible to say, exactly what's going to happen next. But understand that you're going to be introduced to their web portal to apply online, and know that is a necessary step in order to be considered for the next conversation. You get into that applicant tracking system, it essentially compartmentalizes you as a candidate and flags you for being considered for a particular department, a particular role, and a particular hiring manager to go to that next level of conversation. So I would say that's probably one of the immediate things that happens next. Assuming you've had a good conversation, you enjoy what you've heard, and it seems like a very viable option, you're going to submit an online application next.
Now, not that we're going to get into any data analytics here, but I mean, roughly how often does one of these 30-second elevator pitches can convert into an interview?
No, that's a great question. Without getting too granular in data analytics, when we look at the surveying that we do for both job seekers and employers, it's typically at least 50% of everybody that comes through the doors of a career fair are being invited to take that next step. They're going through that application process. They're going to get that interview. Some individuals get multiple interviews. And it is truly a numbers game at that point. The more organizations you talk to, the more applications you submit. And I don't mean, firing at the cyclic rate or using a shotgun effect to just apply to randomness. Make sure you're applying to roles that are a fit for you, that meet your expectations and the organizations, and that your resume is tailored. But the more of those applications you submit, the more interviews are going to be generated. And in order to generate some of those interviews, understand what following up looks like. It's 2023, LinkedIn. Use LinkedIn. Everybody watching this on LinkedIn clearly has LinkedIn. But for those of you that are in Facebook world, or those of you that may be grabbing a battle buddy and asking them to come with you, encourage them to establish their LinkedIn profile, because that is one of the lowest hanging fruit ways to do a quick follow-up with an organization. Some companies, some individuals will hand you business cards and say, let's follow up, let's keep our conversation going. Others have internal policies or procedures that push you more through that digital space. And when that's the case, you want to make sure that you're following up one way or the other. If you don't have a direct email address, find them on LinkedIn and just thank them for spending the time talking with them or with you, and then sharing your excitement and desire to learn what happens next. So I would say, that's a real roundabout way of highlighting the success rate, but you, by virtue of being there, automatically have about a 50% chance of being elevated to the next stage.
And that's an amazing figure, because the last time I looked at Department of Labor statistics, it said something like the likelihood of getting an interview just by firing off your resume, online is something like 14%. So, I mean, a 36% increase in the likelihood that I'm going to get an interview, that's going to make me want to get in the car, put on my best suit, and come down to an RM, a RecruitMilitary career fair.
No, and you bring up a great point, not to, go off the tracks here, bring me back if I do, but we're talking about very different things. And, submitting your online application as opposed to submitting your online application directly following a one-on-one interaction.
Right.
With an individual, with an organization. If you think that the name of the game, don't take what I just previously said in terms of, volume is a variable. That does not mean you go out there and you just start randomly applying, or you exclusively apply online. We call that applying and praying. The same way that we tell a company on the other side, if their only strategy to recruit is to put job postings out there, on their site or on other platforms, and we have hundreds of thousands of job postings on our platform, and it's important. It is a staple, but it is not the strategy. It's a tactic within the strategy. We wouldn't tell them to post and pray the same way that we wouldn't tell you as a job seeker, don't apply and pray. Make it meaningful. But yes, that number makes perfect sense that it's a lower rate in general for online applications, because most of those online applications are not coming off of the tail end of a direct interaction with a recruiter from an organization.
All right, folks, you heard it here. There is simply no substitute for a face-to-face conversation, a handshake, and a dialogue with an employer. Let's talk for a second about the exhibitors. Now, I have a funny feeling that there are some folks who are going to show up. They're going to blaze a trail to that large, well-known defense sector employer. They're going to bounce through the organizations that all have 3-letter and 4-letter abbreviations. They're going to shake a few hands, and then they're going to disappear. Why is that a mistake?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a really big mistake, because you're putting all your eggs in one basket. It's the same reason you don't have just one bullet when you go outside the wire. You have a full combat load, you have multiple mags, you have multiple tools within the arsenal. And we see that entirely too often. It's very frustrating to see. We understand the allure of some of those brands, and those brands are present at our events. They're there. Take the time to talk with them, but don't negate the rest of the audience, because what we have found is that some of those, whether it's a member of the alphabet soup or a large contractor, they're looking for such specific expertise or skill sets, apertures, that naturally, by virtue of the number of people that stand in that line, a majority of them are not going to be a true viable candidate. If we're talking about, a Lockheed Martin, a General Dynamics, Northrop Grumman, name them. You got to have very specific backgrounds and skill sets, certifications, security clearances, a lot of different variables for you to be a perfect candidate for them to consider. So I'm not saying don't spend the time to talk to them. You absolutely should. Create your short list. Understand, and this is part of that preparation that we talked about on the front end, 5 to 10 organizations that are on your short list that you absolutely want to talk to first and foremost. Spend your initial time doing that, but then spend the rest of your time talking to the rest of the organizations. You don't know them, and they don't know you. And you would be amazed and impressed at what kind of outcomes are possible when you just have a conversation and explore the unknown. A great example I'll throw out there, McDonald's. McDonald's used to come to a lot of our career fairs, and a lot of service members, veterans, would just walk right past them because they had the mentality, I'm not going to flip burgers. I'm not a fry cook. I was a staff sergeant. I was a captain, whatever the case might be. McDonald's wasn't there for that. They had corporate needs. They were looking for finance managers. They were looking for accountants, web developers, all these different things that all of those people that walked past them, they could have been a perfect candidate. It could have been a perfect opportunity. But we'll never know because they never even bothered to have that conversation. So we understand you might be under a time constraint. All of our events are 4 hours long. It's typically from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m., regardless of time zone that we're in, regardless if it's a virtual event or an in-person event. 4 hours, 4 solid hours of networking. If possible, make sure you carve out that time. It's during the week. Of course, it'd be perfect if we could do things on weekends, but we wouldn't have the same corporate participation. But take the time to do that work on the front end, have that meaningful conversation, introduce yourself. If you've got 4 hours, take that 4 hours. If you've only got 2 hours, that's fine. Use the short list and then use whatever time remains to go through the rest of the crowd, if you will. But yeah, it all boils down to just not putting your eggs in one basket.
Awesome. And sometimes you've got to look past your own perceptions or biases about a particular brand. I had a conversation with someone, I won't mention the company, works for a big box home improvement retailer. And I said, who do you work for? And he gave me the name of the company. And the first thing I'm thinking of, he's driving a fork truck around the lumber yard or something. Is, oh no, he was a 6-figure earner, and no doubt. And I was really impressed with some of the things that he told me about. So you've got to ask those questions. Now, I've heard this more times than I can count. Your network is your net worth. How important is, or how valuable can a career fair be to expanding your network?
Yeah, I mean the official term for that is social capital.
Nice.
It absolutely has inherent value. I forget who said it, but there's a great saying: you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And that stands out to me. And the more you build out your network, the more possibilities are at your fingertips. You may find the golden opportunity. You may even have a career right now, but you're questioning whether or not it's where you're going to retire from, or is the mission something that you're truly passionate about? And I think that can always be challenged. And when and where that's the case, go out there and continue networking. There's no harm in networking. You never know. I mean, COVID, what a extreme, but very realistic example that we're just getting past at this point. A lot of industries and jobs were wiped off the face of the earth, like in a blip, in a moment's time. Everything shut down. And when things gradually reopened, some of those opportunities were not there anymore. So for those sort of individuals that found themselves with the rug yanked out from underneath them, social capital was very, very valuable to them, because they could pick up the phone, they could send an email, they could reach out on LinkedIn to a recruiter that they had recently met. So it is all about maintaining relationships, and you would be amazed at how great the opportunities can be, even in some cases when you're not looking. It's kind of like when you're trying to find a significant other, you're looking for a boyfriend or a girlfriend, and the more you try, the harder it is. But as soon as you stop trying, all of a sudden there's an interested party, if you will. Same thing kind of happens in the job market. So building that social capital allows you to maintain a finger on the pulse with multiple organizations, multiple recruiters, and you can be served opportunities with you being a passive job seeker in some cases. So build out your network, come out there, press the flesh. If it's virtual, do a camera fist bump, but come out and meet with these organizations. They're all hungry to meet you. These companies all have dedicated military hiring initiatives. Most of these recruiters are prior service themselves. So, it's a very target-rich environment, and it's low stress, high impact, and you're amongst fellow members of the military community in most cases. So,
I think
come out.
I think it's reasonable to say that, while some employers may not have an opportunity for you now, that if you make a positive impression on them and maintain that connection, you don't know, 6 months or a year from now, you might be connected with somebody who says, hey, wait a minute, I remember I met this guy at that career fair. We've stayed in contact over LinkedIn. He just might be right for this role.
Exactly. And that's happening now, whether we're formally in a recession now, flirting with a recession, we're in a state of economic uncertainty. And there are some organizations that are looking to do just that. They're filling a pipeline for the near future. It may not be for right this moment, but some of them, it just depends on their budgeting or their hiring cycle, the seasonality of some of this. So these organizations are filling pipelines. So you might meet with somebody and you may not talk to them again for a couple months. But thank goodness you made a good first impression on them when you did.
Demetrius wants to know, do I need to bring hard copies of my resume?
Great question, Demetrius. I would say yes, a few. Now, our career fairs are unique in that we're leveraging technology now. We were just talking about COVID. One of the technological advancements that was birthed as a result of COVID was a sort of touch-free environment that we had to create in order to run our events. So when you create your professional profile, which is a very important step that you need to do, not just for a career fair, but just to be a part of our ecosystem and be found by these recruiters, your professional profile and your resume are going to be tied to a QR code that you're going to be assigned the day of the event. So you will have the ability to simply hold your smartphone up to a recruiter's phone. They're going to scan your QR code and it's going to pull you and your information and your resume into that, into their own little mini dashboard, if you will. However, hard copy resumes are always still a good thing. Technology isn't always perfect. Wi-Fi signals, whatever the case might be, I would say yes, bring a handful of hard copy resumes, but also know that most of the organizations are going to be using that QR code scanning.
Okay, great. So let's talk about after the event. We've shown up, we've looked sharp, we're prepared, we've had hard copy resumes, we're prepared with the names of the employers and their offerings that they have. We've made our rounds, we've made some solid connections. How do we close this out? How do we optimize, maximize the value post career fair?
Yeah, great question. And, forgive me if I put the cart before the horse earlier. It's all elements that we were previously discussing on the follow-up side. So take notes, make sure that you're annotating who you've spoken to, what the opportunities are, what the next steps are that you've ideally discussed with that organization. Sometimes it'll be more comprehensive and you'll have a one-on-one dialogue. In other cases, it'll be, hey, make sure you apply online. That'll get you to the next phase. The next phase would obviously be to apply online if you have not already done so. Apply to a couple roles on the front end going into the career fair when and where you can. But again, you're going to meet with some organizations that you probably weren't planning to in the first place. So your first step is to go through their job listings and identify those roles that are the best fit for you, apply, submit your resume, and then lean on that follow-up guidance that we just gave you. If you've got a business card, send them a note, say thank you. Do the same thing through LinkedIn. So, tactically, those are the two easiest but most vital things that you can and should be doing. Apply to those, apply to the roles you spoke of, and then follow up. Awesome.
Jan Burgess wants to thank you for this. Thank you for the system. This is awesome, Chris. No more re-entering my resume information to the application. I think we all love that. Uploading a resume and then having to retype everything all over again. Personally, that's right up there with darts as my two favorite hobbies.
And I'll throw in a real quick shameless plug here. We do a bi-weekly, and that's every other week. I know there's debate. Like, is that 2 times a week or is that every other week? We do an every other week advanced resume writing workshop where we will help you. We have a Department of Labor facilitator that joins us, and she provides direct guidance on how to craft your resume specifically for that role that you're applying to. That's a big part of this. Don't submit a general resume for a very specific role. Your resume should speak very directly to that role with keywords. And again, we talk about applicant tracking systems. They're going to scan that resume, and based on some of those keywords, that's going to kind of spit you out as being a good match or a bad match. So make sure your resume is tailored for the role you're going for. But for the sake of a career fair, You have the digital space, if you will, for a single document. So just have a resume that best represents you, tied to your profile. But then if you want to go beyond that, whether it's before the event or after the event, I'll make sure that we add that link somewhere into this thread on both all of the platforms that this is streaming to. But we do advanced resume writing workshops and federal resume writing workshops. So
Nice.
we hope you'll join us for that to make sure that you're prepared to lead with your best foot forward with a stellar document.
You heard that, folks. Free education brought to you by Recruit Military. Look for the link in here. And to Demetrius's point, I think we might be able to extend that by saying to Demetrius, not only should you bring a resume, you may want to bring 2 or even 3 different versions if you're looking at several different roles with 7 different companies.
Spot on. Yeah, that's great advice. You don't want to be too scatterbrained. You don't want to have like 5 fundamentally different industries or categories that you're going for. Maybe you do. I'm not here to tell you that's right or that's wrong, but on the preparation side, do a little bit of that inward reflection. Do some soul searching and figure out exactly what it is you want to do. But it's okay if you arrive day of and you're not sure. You just want to kind of see what's out there. This is a great networking opportunity as well. So we're here for you for any angle, any part of this journey that you might find yourself in.
Absolutely awesome. And thank you to Renee, who's already dropped that link in the chat for us. So folks, if you're interested in those seminars, hit that link up and get registered. Chris, before we close it out today, if you had just one piece of advice you could give to a transitioning service member, veteran, or a mil spouse job seeker before they attend a Recruit Military career fair, what would that be?
I'm going to give you 2, just because one's
you're not authorized to,
for
Chris.
the
You
brand.
can't break the rules. You can't, okay, fine. Today only you can talk.
Yeah,
you can ask me about my business. Go ahead.
So I would say the first thing that you want to do so that you can leverage an entity like ours, all our services are free to you, to truly use this as that force multiplier, create your professional profile. It only takes anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes, depending on how long your time in uniform was. Mil spouses as well, please make sure that you're sharing this with the spouse network, but create that professional profile so that you can announce your presence to the workforce. Let these recruiters find you while you're looking for them. That's the first bit of advice I give anybody, anyway. The other thing that I would say is to go back to what I was just mentioning about doing that inward reflection. Find something that you're passionate about. You are going from serving with extreme service into the great unknown, the civilian world. And it doesn't have to be scary. It's a welcoming place, but you need to find an organization that has a mission that you can truly get behind, an opportunity that offers work that is fulfilling. You do not just want to burn the clock. You do not just want to warm a seat. You need to do something that brings you purpose. And there is just a plethora of opportunities out there that represent just that. And again, all of these companies that we're working with have dedicated military hiring initiatives. They have great company cultures. So I would say make sure you're doing that inward reflecting to figure out what it is that you want to do moving forward.
Absolutely. And Renee, all over it today, Renee has gone ahead and gotten the link for the list of events and the event schedule and dropped it in the chat. Thank you once again, Renee. And for those of you who already, and for those of you who haven't done so yet, you haven't decided that this is, look, 36% increase in the opportunity to get an interview, over 14%. All right. Yeah, this sells itself. So if you haven't already done so, do yourself a solid and register at www.recruitmilitary.com. Get in there, upload a resume, complete your profile, and prepare for career fair success. Also, take some time to go through our job board with over 16,000 employers and an average of 400,000 job opportunities on any given day. With career opportunities around the world and around the corner, you just can't go wrong. Well, that about wraps it up for today. Chris, thanks for being with us.
Appreciate you having me.
For the folks out there in internet land, tune in on April 12th when Recruit Military Live will be featuring Gabby Pettigrew. Resumes 101, an introductory look at resumes will be the topic. Don't miss it. This has been Lucas Connolly for Recruit Military Live. Until next time, good luck and Godspeed.